everyone. I'm Rhonda Walker, chair of Our Revolution Washington Bernie-Kratz Coalition. Welcome to Our Revolution Washington State Monthly Meeting. These monthly calls are a way for all of us to stay connected in our fight for the systemic changes that Bernie inspired us to fight for. Even though Bernie's campaign is suspended, our movement is stronger than ever and will continue to organize for the progressive values we all share. Our group has been doing some great organizing. We are doing outreach to folks who were part of the Bernie 2020 campaign and bringing in Bernie victory captains to our group. Doing outreach on national delegates and PCOs, which are precinct committee officers. We are processing delegates for Bernie and have gotten a lot of people to sign up for a PCO. If you're not already part of our group, we hope you'll be inspired by the speakers you hear on tonight's call and consider joining us. We have a great lineup of speakers. We did have Seattle City Council member Kshama Sawant on our schedule tonight. She's with deep regret had to cancel last minute, but will be on our future calls. Amber King will just do a quick update on some of those issues instead. Then we'll have Jeff Johnson, former president of the Washington State Labor Council, will tell us about his new role with the Labor Network for Sustainability and their efforts to engage labor as a partner in the Green New Deal. Cindy Black of Fix Democracy First will give us a democracy update. We'll hear from Jason Call, candidate for Congress in CD2, on his fight to unseat Rick Larson. And super activist and organizer Chanda Masta of Olympic Peninsula Progressives will talk about building progressive power. And finally, we'll tell you how you can join us in some fun and rewarding actions to help our progressive movement. But first, I want to turn it over to Our Revolution's Kristi Lara. Kristi, you take it away?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me on the Our Revolution call this evening, this Sunday evening. We have fantastic news to give everyone about what's happening on the national level. We have a tremendous number of events that are happening across the nation, helping to organize in your local communities everywhere. In Our Revolution, we like to remind each other that we want to organize locally, and we want to do that by organizing people, organizing money, and organizing power. And one of the ways that we do that to help keep us focused as activists is by looking at our organizing triangle. And I think it should be up if we have that slide available. But what it does is at the very foundation of our triangle, you'll see that we focus primarily on issues-based fights. And those are fights that we all can name off the top of our heads, like a fight for 15, a living wage, making sure that we have housing for all, making sure we have Medicare for all, and all of those various issues, criminal justice reform that progressives across the nation have been fighting for. On the right side of the triangle, you'll see we have been fighting for progressive issues that transform what is the party. We want to build a progressive party, right? We want a party that represents working families, working people, the progressive voice, and not a party that represents the corporate 1% or Wall Street or the wealthy, the privileged. One that represents all of us who are out here fighting for a better, more fair and just system. And on the left side, you'll see we are also fighting for candidates. And in Our Revolution, we refer to candidates as champions. And these champions take those issues from the foundation of the triangle, and they are the voice that brings them up into the electoral side of activism. And so every endorsed candidate of Our Revolution ensures that we are pushing those issues and that we're coming together as a community. Nationally, we've had calls across the nation. Today, we had a Minnesota call with Keith Ellison. In California, we had Rokana on. We had local candidates up and down the ballot, which you guys will have candidates from Washington on today. DA candidates, people fighting to change the system so that it is more just, criminal justice reform, and ending mass incarceration, as well as those broad-based issues like the Green New Deal and healthcare for all. So these meetings, these digital meetings, are a way for us to come together, to stay connected, to know what each of us are doing in cities across the nation and across the state of Washington. And so we want to make sure that we stay connected, that we build that network, that infrastructure, so we can begin to win the fights at not just the local level, but the state level, as well as the national level. And real quick, I'll just mention, Rhonda, you've been on some of these calls with us. On Monday nights, we have our national organizing call. It is a call just for OR organizers, people actively organizing in their communities. And you'll hear from amazing, inspiring fighters, one of which was the West Virginia candidate for governor. He was on their dynamite candidate, dynamite progressive, talking about how we needed to move beyond, just what we consider as far as our local fights, but at the gubernatorial level, really fighting for those people, people-powered campaigns, and pushing those issues that matter to our local members. So we hope our revolution, along with our coalition across the states, across different organizations, build that network, build that infrastructure, so that when amazing people come, we're able to help them in a very organized and purposeful way.
Wow, that is beautiful. Thank you so much, Kristi, for joining us tonight and really bringing the true message of this movement to the forefront of Washington State. So we really appreciate you coming in. At the beginning, we were going to show a quick little video to get people pumped up, and I think it just kind of skipped that little beat. So I'd love to show that now before we get into our next speakers. Oz, do you mind playing that real quick?
When we fight, when we organize, we must organize locally in order to win nationally. That means we must build local political powerhouses who fight on the issues and elect progressive champions up and down the ballot.
We have to build from the bottom up.
We don't have you as part of the revolution. We can't win elections and we can't create change.
They don't do it alone. They don't do it with billionaires funding their campaigns. They do it with people power.
What's the solution? Our revolution!
We are going to keep knocking on doors. We are going to keep our Congress members accountable and make sure they represent our interests. We're going to keep holding town halls and summits and meetings, and we're going to keep getting the truth out there.
So we are gathered here today to organize to transform our broken political and justice system. Because when we organize...
Oh, I love that video. It's such inspiration. So thank you again, Kristi, for being here tonight. Our first speaker, like I said before, Chanda Masta, was not able to make it tonight, but she is in for our future calls. Real quick, we're going to have Amber King come in and just give some highlights on what Chanda is going to speak about tonight, and then we'll get back into our regularly scheduled program. Amber, do you want to take this piece, please?
Yes, thank you. How are we doing tonight? I've been at several of the events protesting Amazon, as you can see behind me. We have some of the events that have occurred over the last couple of weeks. And the big picture is that the Amazon tax, 1% tax on the top 2% Seattle businesses, would be able to distribute $500 checks to residents hit the hardest. And they are having a hearing. It's Thursday, May 21st. It's at 6:00. And they are organizing to not only help cover rent strike, the stimulus checks will only cover about 46% of the rent for an average Seattle one-bedroom apartment. We have very high costs to live in this city, and a lot of people in the city have been dealt the hardest. So it is, in terms of layoffs, in terms of reopening, we are still unclear, and we know that people need relief right now, and that there is a lot of money. We've seen Jeff Bezos possibly going into the trillionaire category, and the people at the bottom need help. And so we are hoping to help them do that. Seattle also has passed an eviction moratorium. Inslee has banned landlords until June 4th from evicting tenants for unpaid rent. That's only a couple weeks away. And so we need to have some kind of provisional assistance so that reasonable payment plans and some kind of a clause that could help us. We don't want people to come out of this with maybe or maybe not a job and no place to live. That's really stressing our social networks and our systems. And we need to make sure that we can help these people in need the most. So we have, if you look in some of the information we have, there is a call for a tax on Amazon now. It is asking the Green New Deal along with jobs, social housing, and emergency COVID relief. It is taxing the largest businesses at a very small fraction that will immediately help the people who need it the most. It would be a $500 a month payment for 4 months for up to 100,000 working class households, including those who have lost income as a result of COVID. So we hope you can get involved. There's lots of information out there on where to join some of the activities and protests. We're having lots of great car protests at the Seattle City Council meeting and in front of Amazon, as you see in the pictures. And we hope you can join us. It's really important that we make this transition for the city of Seattle and have a livable place that all of us can afford to get through this pandemic and beyond.
Thank you, Amber, for at least giving us some highlights of what's to come when Shama gets on, hopefully next month. Are there any questions out there at all regarding these pieces, the rent strike or the Amazon tax?
I also just wanted to give a shout out to everybody in our Zoom event. Thank you for joining us, and we appreciate your questions and comments. So please send them my direction and we'll get them asked.
Excellent. And thank you everybody watching in YouTube as well. We have this going out in a few different places. So thank you all for taking the time to joining us. So thank you, Amber, for that. So our next speaker is Jeff Johnson, who served as president of the Washington State Labor Council, AFL-CIO, for 8 years until his retirement last year. Jeff is now a board member for the Labor Network for Sustainability. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you.
Tell us about your new role and what the network is doing to bring labor into a Green New Deal.
You bet. Be glad to. Look, I love that video you started off with. And not only do we have a political crisis right now, and our political system is broken, but our economic system is broken. We're living in a time of great economic chaos and as well as an existential crisis. So look, this is a great time for me to be working at the Labor Network for Sustainability. What we do is we bring together progressive labor along with environmental justice community, along with the tribes, along with environmental groups, and do cross-sectoral organizing. One thing's clear, this global health pandemic has revealed the fault lines in our capitalist economy more than extreme income inequality has shown us, more than climate change and climate disaster has shown us. It's shown us clearly that our economy is broken. You know, we've seen over the last 6 weeks, 36.5 million unemployment claims filed. At the end of last month, about 15% of the workforce was unemployed. We believe the true figures are up around 20 or 25%. Latinx workers are the most highly unemployed ethnic groups out there, are over 20% right now. And the real fear is that many of these jobs are not coming back. So we've got to do something. You know, our health system clearly has failed. I mean, we have an health insurance system, not a health care system. 27 million workers have lost their health care in the last 2 months. That's added to the 87 million that didn't have it or had inadequate health insurance. And our safety net, of course, we all know from our revolution, has been shredded for the last 4 decades. So look, our existing economy has brought us to the brink of this existential crisis. And the solutions they're offering, even the HEROES Act, which has many wonderful parts to it, they're still incompatible with solving the problems of climate, disaster, racism, and inequality. So what we're trying to do at Labor Network for Sustainability, working with many progressive groups across the country, is several things. One is bringing together, again, cross-sector organizing in the environmental justice community, environment, labor, is that we've been amplifying worker struggles throughout this pandemic, right? Fighting for more personal protective equipment, ventilators, social distancing at the workplace. In fact, we have 6 fruit packing houses on strike right now in Eastern Washington over the issue of unsafe working conditions, working too close together in the packing houses, not having PPE, and not being paid enough to risk their health and their lives and their families' lives right now. That's over 1,000 workers. So we've been working on putting pressure on the administration to enact the Defense Production Act so that we can start manufacturing and distributing, safety equipment, something that by, if there were any morals in capitalism, this is a responsibility of all employers to provide for their workers. So we're doing that type of organizing, but a project that we had planned to do that has shifted its focus is a just transition listening project. We had intended to spend this summer and fall going around the country and face-to-face meetings with workers, with community organizations, with tribes, talking about what they think a just transition is to get us from a fossil fuel economy to a clean alternative energy economy, and promoting the idea of the Green New Deal. What this pandemic has made so clear to us is that the fault lines in capitalism are so great that it's not enough just to do the transition from fossil fuels to the Green New Deal. But we've got to talk about how our economy and how our society is organized and what values are placed on work and workers. So we're really talking about systemic changes. Just as Bernie did in his campaign and has done for the last 4 years, we need to talk about what are the immediate and short term, what are the medium term and long term structural changes that need to happen in our economy so that workers and communities have a real voice in the economic decisions that impact their daily lives, that we can create a unionized green economy, that we can build a comprehensive social safety net, that we can redefine what the common good is. And that we need to look at all of these policies through a gender and racial equity lens. So we're going to do these listening sessions. We're going to be interviewing labor unions, progressive union members. We're going to be interviewing community groups from the environmental justice community, from tribes all around the country, and asking them to dig deep and to think through, so what are the immediate changes that they need in order for us to survive this pandemic and to move forward? But more importantly, what do we need? What type of structural changes have to be made in the economy so that people, communities have a real voice in how the economy moves forward and what kind of society we have, so that we have not just a just transition from fossil fuels to clean energy, but we have a just economy.
Oh, that sounds just wonderful and much needed. I'm so excited of all the work that you guys are doing. Thank you so much for that. We do have some questions for you from the audience. Amber, do you want to take it away?
Sure. So I see some questions, but they're not quite necessarily on your topic. I know for myself, I am presently helping write the state party platform on labor and economic justice. So conversations and the words you've been using have been very helpful in making those adjustments, and hopefully that we'll have the language and a document that can be used to go forward and help employ those transitions and address this pandemic in ways that we haven't been able to. So one of the questions, which you probably don't want to answer, but I will ask it anyway, it's from Ursula. She is asking, will the Washington Dem Party work to get rid of Citizens United, get rid of the Electoral College, and address universal service, which is military and non-military? And then she had a follow-up to that, which was fight to put money back into the gold standard. So I don't know if any of those are fun topics you'd like to address or here on a national level. Do you guys talk much about the gold standard in environmental labor?
I want to tell you this. No, we don't. In fact, that's and I apologize, Ursula, but that's a losing cause. In fact, what's interesting is this, in the HEROES Act, there's almost $1 trillion for aid to state and local governments and tribes and U.S. territories. Not nearly enough money to patch the broken revenue shortfalls that state and local governments have. And we're going to see a world of hurt as this pandemic gets worse. But what I've learned over the past 6 months is that the Federal Reserve Bank, for the first time in history, has the ability to purchase bonds not just from the government, but purchase bonds from corporations, to purchase state and local bonds. They had never been allowed to do this before. Now, do you think they're actually going to do that? I'm guessing no, given this current administration. But I want to tell you, I read this the other day. It's knock your socks off. Between March 18th and March 31st, the Federal Reserve Bank purchased $1.14 trillion in Treasury and corporate bonds. $1.414 trillion worth of bonds. So putting that in perspective, if we want to rebuild the economies in our various states, and we want to build it through a regenerative economy, through a Green New Deal, we could float as many bonds as it would take to transform our economies, and the Fed has the power to buy those bonds. They can charge whatever interest they want, meaning they can charge as low an interest rate as they want, and they can have the payback over any period of time they want. It's a possibility, but we need a political revolution to go along with that economic tool. So you got your work cut out for you, our revolution.
I think we're ready to take it on.
All right.
Any other questions for Jeff?
I'm not seeing any at the moment. Just a lot of praise and thank you from everyone. And a few of the questions will probably go to our candidate. It's appearing. People want to talk more party politics, but I think that's really important, and you bring great points to the table, and we couldn't agree more. Thank you so much, Jeff.
Thank you all. Appreciate the work.
Jeff, thank you for all you're doing and what the organization you're working with is doing. And we are here to help every step of the way. Next, we have Cindy Black. She is the Executive Director of Fixed Democracy First. She was campaign director for the successful statewide ballot initiative 735 campaign, making Washington the 18th state to call for a constitutional amendment to overturn court decisions like Citizens United. Welcome, Cindy.
Hi there. How you doing?
Fabulous. Thank you again for coming on tonight. Cindy is kind of our guru here in Washington State with Fixed Democracy First. She keeps us updated on all the democracy things going on there. So Cindy is coming tonight to give us an update, not only on state where we are statewide, but also nationally. Cindy, go ahead, take it away.
Yeah, I'm going to focus on just two national bills right now, since the legislative session is not going on in Washington, though the governor may call an emergency session to deal with some issues around COVID-19. But the issues we're focused on with Fixed Democracy First is right now around protecting the vote. through the November election. A lot of the states around the country are having difficulty getting up to speed, whether it's voting by mail, ensuring there's enough polling locations, early voting. Those are some of the things we're advocating for. The HEROES Act, which Jeff mentioned earlier, which is HR 6800, the Health and Economy Recovery Omnibus Emergency Solutions Act, try to say that 3 times fast, has a lot of things in there. A lot of people don't think it has gone far enough, but the pieces that we're interested in this bill is the $3.6 billion for protecting elections and actually getting what we need. So basically the things in there would be providing resources to protect the health of the poll workers and voters, requiring states to have at least 15 consecutive days of early voting so you can spread people out in the polls, and that they have to be open for at least 10 hours. And then plenty of distancing, making sure that people are distanced properly, making sure that paid postage is covered for voting by mail, as well as that there's drop boxes and other ways for people to be able to get their ballots in, prohibiting restrictions to voter accessibility. Like the kind of things we're seeing is we shouldn't have to have a notary or a witness for you to be able to vote in this country. And so that would remove those barriers, making sure that tribal communities, because a lot of times tribal communities don't have traditional addresses, so we want to make sure those things are addressed. And there's a few other things in there that we really support. The other piece in there, there's $25 billion for the post office, which is really important, because if we don't have a post office, it makes it very difficult to vote by mail, because I doubt UPS and FedEx is going to be able to do that for us. So we desperately need the post office. There's many other things in there, but we're focusing on the election pieces. So you can take a look at that. It's passed the House, but we don't think it has a lot of chance of passing in the Senate, mainly because if you've heard Trump say it's DOA, he doesn't like the voting by mail. But you have me up there as progressive issues, but guess what? The issues we work on are everybody's issues, right? Democracy is for everybody. It's not just a progressive issue. We're not just saying progressives can vote here. We want everybody to be able to vote, right? Access to voting is important. So it's a much bigger issue, and not all Republicans are against voting by mail. Our own Kim Wyman, the Secretary of State, is in favor and has been supportive and going around and supporting other states and getting that, as well as many other governors and election officials around the country. So it's being made a partisan issue, but it's not a partisan issue. That's what I'm trying to say. And then the other bill I just want to mention real briefly is the Coronavirus Oversight and Recovery Ethics Act of 2020, the CORE Act. And I gave Rhonda links to all of these bills and information for you to check out. But this is really important because with all this money going around, accountability is so important. And one thing we need to do is hold our government accountable when it's giving out money, especially we know a lot of the corporations are lining up. They probably had reserved seating for a lot of that funding, but that's a big part of the problem. So what this bill would do is prohibit conflicts of interest, empower and protect the Inspector General, because if you know, Trump just fired the latest Inspector General on Friday, strengthen congressional oversight, strengthen the CARES Act executive branch and accountability oversight entities, protect whistleblowers. So if people come out and say, hey, there's an issue, we want to protect them. And also restrict and disclose lobbying, political spending, and just improve the transparency of where this bailout money is coming and strengthening enforcement. Those are the most important things about that bill. And so those are the two things we're paying attention to right now and supporting. And we have a Protect Our Vote virtual rally on Saturday, May 23rd, 23rd at noon Pacific time that people are welcome to join, that we're trying to get the word out and put a lot of pressure on our congressional delegation to get something happening to protect elections, because time is running out. A lot of these things need to happen quickly. So
that is so true. We don't have a whole lot of time on our side, do we?
time is running out. Yes.
So thank you. I want to bring in Amber real quick to see if there's any questions for all the stuff you just updated us on. There's lots of things going on. Amber?
Yeah. So we have a question from Sharon. She is wondering if there is a way that we can support election reform without promoting Elizabeth Warren, as many of us are very unhappy with her.
That's tricky. I mean, I think she's supporting some of these bills. Obviously, she's one of the prime sponsors of the CORE Act, but so is Pramila Jayapal. So I understand that, but unfortunately, you know, we have to take the legislation where we can get it, and she's one of the few people that will actually put it forward. So, and I want to look at it this way. You can support the legislation without supporting the candidate, right? If somebody is supporting a piece of legislation you like, you can still support that legislation and you don't have to come out in favor of that candidate. So to me is look at the details, look at the legislation and get behind that. That's what I would recommend.
Awesome. Thank you. I had another question there, wondering what your thoughts are on MMT, modernized money theory.
Oh, that's not really in my wheelhouse, but anything that makes the economy more democratic, I think we'd be in favor of. So I don't know a lot about that topic, but if it makes everything more democratic, I would support it. Because democracy has to go on all kinds of levels, not just in our political system, but schools, work situation, even your home life. If we're really serious about democracy, we should be going at it after every level.
Totally agree. Is that it, Amber?
That is it as far as this piece in the topic that I can see.
Excellent. Cindy, thank you again for joining us tonight. And all the links are in the YouTube link, and anybody else out there will make sure if you want them, we'll get them to you. Thank you, Cindy, so much for being here. Next up, we've got Jason Call, who's running for Congress in Washington's 2nd District. Jason is a progressive champion who supports Medicare for all, a Green New Deal, criminal justice reform, and a guaranteed job with a living wage. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you so much for having me on the show again.
Our pleasure. So you are running against Rick Larson, who identifies as a Democrat. Let's talk about his record. You have a page on your campaign website called Rick's Receipts. And it says he's taken money from Exxon and the Koch brothers. He's on the Armed Service Committee and has taken huge sums from the companies that feed our endless wars. Plus the fossil fuel industry, health insurance profiteer. It's a pretty incriminating list, isn't it, Jason?
It is. You know, historically, Larson has taken 75% of his funding he's seeking a 10th term, and he's taken 75% of his funding from corporate PACs or other corporate sources. So he's also chair of his only leadership position is he's chair of the House Aviation Subcommittee of Transportation. And I just want to highlight this connection between money and government oversight really came to bear with the 737 MAX program, that you know, some critical parts of that were outsourced. The aviation subcommittee did not do its job under his leadership with oversight. We ended up with planes crashing, hundreds of people dying, and thousands of workers laid off, and then a fired Boeing CEO walking away with $60 million severance. And that all happened under Larson's leadership in the House. And I think we just need to really do better. So, you know, I'm out here supporting Medicare for all, Green New Deal. Neither of those pieces Medicare for all legislation and the Green New Deal resolution, neither of those Larson supports. And I think we can just do a lot better representing the working class, consumer safety, and having a better economy for everybody.
So what actually inspired you to run for office?
Well, Bernie said, get out there and run. And so I did. You know, I've been a constituent of the current office holder for since he's been in office. He was elected when Clinton was still president. So like I said, he's seeking a 10th term. I have been oppositional to him and his conservative Democratic positions, which are more moderate Republican than what anything that's on the Democratic Party platform. But I've been oppositional to him for the last 15 years since he signed the Republican-sponsored Bankruptcy Act in 2005 that made it impossible to shed student loan debt. I am a proponent of free tuition-free college for everybody, vocational schools, job training for everybody, and cancellation of student debt. So he and I have been fighting for a long time. He's certainly not a progressive, although he's trying to rebrand himself as a grassroots environmentalist. He's been labeled part of the pro-extinction Democratic caucus, which you know really identifies him as the worst Democrat in the Washington delegation on environmental issues. And it was really time. He's never had a substantial challenge from the left, and we actually right now have a great campaign going. I was asked by a number of local progressive leaders to take on this fight. And we have a fantastic volunteer team. We've got over 100 people signed up to volunteer. We just placed a huge union printed sign order. We're going to have our signs going up all over the district here over the next month. We're getting into text banking and phone banking. And I really think this is a winnable race. You know, we've got right now 6 Republicans, and the incumbent and myself filed for this race now that filing week is over. So I am verified the progressive candidate in this race. We think the Republicans are going to split that vote. This is a very blue district, and that I will be on the ballot next to Rick Larsen. And then the voters of this district will have a real choice that they have not had in the last 20 years. So I'm very excited about this.
Oh, it's about time. I got chills just thinking of all those Republicans splitting that vote. Definitely is going to be helpful. What do you see as the biggest issue facing your district?
Well, you know, healthcare is a huge issue for everybody. I support Medicare for all, but I think beyond that, specifically for our district, I've said this before, Washington's 2nd District has more coastline than almost any other district in the entire country. We've got the islands in the Puget Sound. We've got a 75-mile corridor along the I-5 coastline in Puget Sound. So we've got about 400 miles of coastline. Lots of it is inhabited. We've got a lot of coastal cities. You know, and if we don't get a handle on this climate emergency, and we start seeing the rising tides that are predicted over, you know, in the next 10 to 20 years, there's a lot of our district that could be underwater. And so if we don't implement these programs to transform our energy systems to renewable, sustainable energy, to get a hold on of global warming and eliminate carbon emissions, it's going to have a huge impact in my home district. And that's really why I'm selling the Green New Deal. I wanted to appreciate very much what Jeff said about how the environmental activism and labor really needs to work together. Because when we transition to those energy systems, and this is true for the healthcare system also, when we do that transition, everything is grounded in a just transition for the labor force. We don't want anybody to be out of work. We want to make sure people are retrained and replaced in jobs that they are either already good at or a good fit for them, or we get them training for the new jobs. There's going to be a lot of green construction going on as we transform our energy systems. And here in the 2nd Congressional District, we are really ripe to be a leader in the nation. We've got geothermal energy sitting on the Ring of Fire. We've got a ton of coast, like I said, so we've got tidal energy. And you know, solar works here also. People have this idea that though we don't ever see the sun in Washington. Well, I'll tell you what, with global warming, we're seeing a lot more sun lately. So let's take advantage of having locally built solar panels right here in our district. I have solar panels on my own house, and they were built right here in my hometown of Marysville. Unfortunately, that business is closed right now. We need to start those businesses back up again.
That's for sure. Thank you so much, Jason. So it's actually Q&A time. So Amber, are you ready? Are you gearing up? I heard there might be some good questions out there for our candidate, Jason Call. Ready to take that away?
Yeah, I'm just trying to get them all copied over to us. So the first question is, what are your primary goals when you defeat Rick Larson and take office, Jason?
Well, I'm going to get behind Medicare for All day one. I'm going to do whatever I can to support Green New Deal legislation. One of the things that I'm really interested in is getting a federalized waste management program. I think that recycling is expensive. If private corporations are not willing to do that, then we've got to have the government invest in that, because recycling is incredibly important. Getting behind was stopping fossil fuel subsidies so that we can actually have a government that is willing to transition to new energy systems. And then, honestly, we got to get corporate cash out of government. We've got to end this corrupt cycle of lobbyists, the influx of dark money. I was supportive of the I-735 initiative that we had here in Washington State in 2016, where we signed on to have our representatives be the 18th state to move to amend to overturn Citizens United. I'll also say additionally that although the incumbent may have spoken out against Citizens United, he benefits greatly from dark money, and you can see that when you track his the contributions to his campaigns.
Awesome. Thank you. Another question from our audience says, I rely on you guys to act up from the title of this movement. We have already had Obama with Hope and Change, and they did in last rigged elections and primaries. So what can we do to help our election integrity?
Well, I've always been a supporter of the election integrity movement. I'm very leery of any electronic voting machines. I personally think we need to go back to pencil and paper ballots and let that process carry through. I don't know where I necessarily stand on the Electoral College. If anybody had that question, I think there's arguments on both sides of it, and I'm not quite sure what the best side of that could be. Certainly, we can say in a couple of elections that relying on the Electoral College has given way too much power to less populated and conservative states. And so that's certainly an argument to abolish it and go straight up with the popular vote. That's going to be a really tough thing to get through Congress. But I think, to have federal standards for elections and not leave it up to the states, where in some of the more conservative states, and particularly in some of the poorer neighborhoods where you see these long lines and people are waiting for 7-8 hours, that is just absolutely criminal. I think Elections Day should be a national holiday, and then we need to make it as easy as possible for everybody to vote, and that would include going to all mail-in voting, and I think we need to implement federal ranked choice voting.
Awesome. Thank you. Another question we have is an urgent issue. Do we know where the $6.2 trillion rescue package has gone, and can we have full transparency?
Boy, that's a deep one. I don't know that I'm the right person to answer that, but I know about well, let me say that we know far too much of this money has gone to bail out corporations, and I will say with no worker protections and with no environmental demands. And if you look at what France did with their bailouts, particularly of their airline industry, France said, we are not going to give the airline industry, we're talking Airbus here, and they're a huge national airline competitive with Boeing. But France says, we're not going to give you any of this money unless you commit to redesigning your aircraft so that they are run on cleaner energy, and are less polluting to our atmosphere. So we don't want to necessarily shut down the aviation industry, but we do want it to operate in a more environmentally friendly way. France managed to put those conditions on their own airline industry, and I don't know why we weren't able to do the same thing.
I have one more question that I just saw in the chat, and they want to know, first, how do we donate to your campaign? And second, have you reached out to Boeing workers? And if so, what was the result?
So let me answer the second one first. I have not yet reached out to Boeing workers specifically. I have reached out to labor councils. I will say I'm very excited that the Washington State Labor Council, who the first speaker, Jeff, was formerly involved with, they have endorsed the incumbent in the past. They did not endorse him this year. Their vote was taken in the last couple of days, and they chose not to endorse him. So I'm reaching out to labor groups, but as you probably know, there's a long-standing relationship between labor organizations and incumbents, especially when you've been in office for as long as Rick Larsen has. And so it's very difficult for a challenger to break that cycle and get their message across. However, I will say that my labor platform is unmatched. You can go to my website, go to issues, and when you look at the tab that says an economy that works for all, I support the repeal of Taft-Hartley. I support employee card check. I support the repeal of all right to work legislation. I think everybody should be unionized and should benefit from union collective bargaining, union protections, and be in a living wage job. There is no job that is done today that shouldn't be a living wage job. So my labor platform is very strong. You can donate to me, callforcongress.com. That's FOR, not the number 4, callforcongress.com. There's a donate tab on there. That's my favorite question. How do I donate to you? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jason, so much for joining us again tonight. We really appreciate you being on the front lines in this battle. So another frontliner, but coming from a different angle. Next, we have Chanda Masta. She is chair of the Olympic Peninsula Progressives, which we call OPP, but she's also heading up the Our Revolution chapter there through that. Welcome, Chanda.
You down with OPP? Yeah, you know me.
We are.
We are the Olympic Peninsula Progressives, and we were a committee that was supported Bernie Sanders inside the Democratic Party in 2016. And then after that, in 2017, we signed up and got us our Rev chapter. As soon as our Rev launched, we held an event, and our strategy has been to network and get to know the people that are fighting for the same issues that we are supporting. And it's really been a phenomenal thing to go. We live very rural in where we're at in Washington State. So it's not as easy for us as the Seattle people to organize. We have to travel. This picture behind me, that's a 2.5 hour drive, but it's within my LD. So, but getting out there and meeting the people in the next county over and the next county over, it has really, just gave us a support system and a network. We are holding events and we are supporting candidates and we are holding candidate forums. And, we get hooked up with great, phenomenal people like you guys doing incredible things. And the powerhouse triangle is just really working out for us here. But right now in this lockdown, it's time for us to kind of reinvent how we're doing it. We used to just book a hall and then we'd kind of throw an event. Well, we can't do that right now, but we don't want to lose that momentum. So some of the things that we're doing is daily calls to kind of check on each other. How are you? Do you need anything? Just check in and stay in touch. And not only that, but we're kind of stepping out of our comfort zones and we're doing town halls, we're doing Zooms, we're doing stuff like this. So, we're all growing during all of this. We're learning new ways of communicating and organizing. And I just thank you guys so much for helping give us the tools to do that.
Absolutely. So you kind of started off as an activist and then realized, you needed to get into the political activism piece, right? And we kind of work on the inside-outside strategy. How does that work for you and what does that mean to you?
Well, I spent the last 4 years working inside the Democratic Party. I've been an elected PCO, but because we have our kind of generic OPP name, we've been able to support stuff on the outside too. So it's been great to be able to branch out, but yet still work in the party and support people inside the party and support such great candidates like Jason.
Excellent. So how are you looking at growing your local group? What do you think some of the things you guys are going to be able to do in this time of COVID?
Well, we've been organizing, of course, for, Bernie. We still have Bernie delegates that are still out there. We're still supporting them. But, getting people involved with these type of calls, getting people involved with Zoom meetings. People think that Zoom's a hard thing. It really isn't that hard to schedule a Zoom meeting and send it out to some people. That energy is still out there. That has been out there for years. And we just want to make sure that we retain it and start thinking ahead of what we can be doing as soon as, we are allowed to go back out. What we're going to have a lot of people that are going to be homeless and food insecure and, jobless and have no insurance. So we got our work cut out for us when the doors do open.
That is very, very true. Thank you, Chanda. I want to check to see if there's any questions for you out there. Amber?
I haven't seen any yet, but let me just check with everybody. Maybe just talk a little bit more about some of the amazing things you guys have done and how you see the next few months developing.
Oh, it's been really great because we are such a rural area. We have Jefferson County and Grace Harbor County that are both in our LD. So we're really large, It takes a while to get to each other, but we're so supportive of each other. It's so amazing to see somebody drive 2.5, 3 hours to show up at an event, and so booking these events and, trying to get people out to them, being supportive of each other. That's really what it's about, is networking. And once you get a hold of those people come and people go. But as long as you have their phone numbers, their emails, hey, you can touch base with them because their hearts don't change. They still support the things that we're fighting for. So, just building those networks and then being able to tap them in the future, I think is the most important thing we can do right now.
Excellent. Thank you. Were there any that popped up, Amber?
None so far, but I have a question for her as I prepare myself to get ready to file for national delegate. What can I do to prepare myself for this additional Bernie journey under duress, I would say?
Well, I would say keep your opinions close to your vest if you're trying to be a Bernie delegate. Anything can be misconstrued and used against you. Definitely brush up on what's going on. I mean, you're right in the platform, Amber. That's amazing. That is going to affect so much in Washington. The fact that your progressive voice is in there changing these things. So just the fact that you're carrying that knowledge and fighting for us. Thank you. Thank you. How can I give you advice? I am so enamored with what you do. I don't feel like I can tell you to do anything.
Well, this is new territory for me. I wasn't able to file last time as a delegate, and I was only able to take supporting roles. So whatever form our convention takes place and our state convention, I am still pushing forward and look forward to seeing as much progressive change as we can.
We thank you so much for that. The people that are still in there, still fighting for the issues, even though Bernie's not right now, that's so important because that's really what we're here for. That's why we're in this fight, is for our issues, to change it for all of us.
So true. So true. Thank you again, Chanda, for being such an amazing activist out there and leading the way for our movement here in Washington State. Okay, we're going to actually shift gears over to Courtney Love now. She's going to give us some calls to action. Courtney, are you ready?
I'm ready. Thank you for asking. Hello. Thank you again, Chanda. I've always had deep respect for all your efforts in the Olympic Peninsula progressives. And if you are feeling inspired by all these progressive champions and wondering how you can turn that inspiration into action, the first thing you can do is get connected to your local Our Revolution group. We've got some rewarding actions you can join in. The Washington Monthly Statewide Call, which is what we're doing now, usually the 4th Sunday of the month, barring any holiday disruption. We have weekly Thursday phone banks, and we have weekly Sunday meetings at 7:30. And we have daily, Monday through Friday, community check-ins, 11 to 1. Please join us for those. You can find the links in the discussion underneath the YouTube video. Oh, and we also, next Saturday, have our endorsed candidate town hall part 2 coming. Those candidates being highlighted will be Rebecca Parson of Congressional District 6, Joshua Collins of Congressional District 10, and Mariana Everson of Legislative District 19 for the State House of Representatives. It is important during this time of physical distancing that we stay connected through our organizing calls. Tomorrow at 5:30 Pacific time, be sure to hop on our Revolution National's weekly leaders call, which will feature Pennsylvania State Representative Summer Lee, a progressive champion who defeated a 20-year incumbent in 2018. And because our revolution is a national movement, we encourage you to check out some of our great state calls happening over the coming days, where you'll hear from other local leaders and progressive champions, as you are doing on this Washington call tonight. Montana State Call is on the 20th, and will feature our revolution's own Jim Hightower. Texas will have its state call on the 21st and will feature Jessica Cisneros, the 26-year-old immigration lawyer endorsed by AOC, who ran for Congress in a closely watched race in Texas. And Virginia's call on the 23rd will feature special guest Sarah Nelson, president of the Association of Flight Attendants. And I also see that Virginia House Delegate Lee Carter is slated to attend. I had the pleasure of meeting him last fall. Please send him my regards. Rhonda, back to you.
Thank you so much, Courtney. Thanks to our inspiring speakers and to all of you for all that you are doing to build our revolution. Before we spin off, let's do our chant. So you guys know our chant, right? When we organize, we win.
We win.
Right? Are we going to do it? Ready? 1, 2, 3. When we organize, we win. Stay safe and healthy, and don't forget to vote. Thank you all so much.
Mm-hmm.